courts will stop the government action and institute its own method of investigation and come to conclusion. There will be no executive interfering in that. Similarly, in Kenya, for example, if you apply for a license, like you have said, the first thing somebody is going to look at is, what is his last name? Is he Odhiambo? Is he Kamau? Or is he Kiptet? Okay. The name issue comes in, the Bible issue comes in. The second question that comes in is, where does he come from and how much money does he have in the pocket? Is he politically correct? Did he vote for the minister who is the minister in charge of this department? If he did not vote, he's an enemy of the government, don't give him. And that is it. Now, what's wrong with us from the diaspora going in and saying, hey guys, here we are, but let us fix the mess by putting in place right informative constitution. Let us educate the masses about this constitution and let us see how it comes about. How do we then, where do we then go from there? Let us look at the institutions of governance. After looking at the institutions of governance, the other thing we have to look at is, where is the center of power? Too much power corrupts. I don't want to have too much power. Let us devolve powers to the people back to the grassroots from the state level, where we shall have an accountable electorate, an accountable legislator that is accountable to the people on the ground. For example, I come from Mumias in Kakamega. What would be wrong with having an elected governor in Mumias, where taxes in Western Province, for example, where taxes collected from Western Province, 70% of the taxes will be put to develop the area's infrastructure and 30% taken to the government, whereby if there will be any kind of corruption, then we put mechanism of awareness on corruption and to hold people accountable right from the grassroots. So what you have in Kenya is very rotten. What we have in Kenya right now is very malignant. What we have in Kenya right now is very redundant. Now people are fighting for next election already. Which tribe comes from where? I'm sitting here with a very learned gentleman. He's a film producer in Hollywood. And my friend Ngunjiri here is a Kenyan. He's a Kenyan like myself. Why does he answer my phones when I'm not there? Because he loves his country and he's seeing light across the tunnel. Why is he not my brother? Why is he not my uncle? So we need a leader who is tribalist. We need a constitution put in place. We need a working nation where everybody will be encouraged to work, where every university student will have an incentive after finishing the university. There will be a proper infrastructure put in place to absorb total unemployment, rather than having people ride a train which was built by the Indian coolies many years ago, going to Kisumu, using the same old railhead, not without putting proper transport infrastructure in the system. Why do we have to beg food, yet we can produce enough food? We have enough fresh water, we have enough land. Why should Israel be where it is today and Kenya being down there? Those are the questions that we need to address.
Okay. Now, I guess the biggest thing that we have, and we all know this, it's easy for us to say, this is what we need, which is very true, Professor. You're saying everything that every Kenyan needs to hear. I guess the problem that we come about is the challenge to actually implement this, because you're saying things that we all need. I guess it's just the question of how are we going to do it?
First of all, without putting a constitution into place and defining the mechanisms of implementation, we are all going to go back in the same cycle. We need Kenyans to understand about what they are going into. We need Kenyans to be empowered by their own constitution. And this constitution should be a constitution that is acceptable, a humane constitution written by Kenyans. South Africa just came out of where they were the other day. They wrote a constitution. They have a constitutional court in their country. The role of parliament is defined by the constitution. The role of the executive is defined by constitution. And South African constitution is working very well. And South Africans now know what to do when something is wrong. That is needed in Kenya. Look at Botswana and Ghana. They have constitutions that direct people on what to do. The government cannot abuse its own constitution because it's mandated to follow that particular constitution. But in Kenya, we need Kenyans, first of all, to say no to a rotten system, to say no to something that will have to have generic or specific effect on them forever. For example, I'm going through the new draft constitution. Look at the way they have tailored the relationship between the state and religion. They're saying that the state will not interfere in religion. And they are saying that the state will not be entangled into religion. But do you know the implication of that? That actually is, when you compare it to the First Amendment clause on religion in the United States Constitution, the First Amendment says that the state shall not entangle or promote religion. That means that you cannot teach anything or religious studies in a primary school if that primary school is a public school. You cannot even sing an anthem in that using religious connotations. That is bound to happen in Kenya. All you need is, okay, if the state says that the state will not interfere in religion and they are teaching or they are allowing religious subjects to be taught in a public school, then that means that as soon as this constitution is adopted, religious education will not be taught in primary schools, in secondary schools, in government institutions. Imagine people like us who are Christians, who have been brought up by Christian faith, having our children going to school where there is no religion because of wrong implementation of the constitution, and also because of people having not been told the implications of that. Yet Kenyans have lawyers who look at those kind of inequities. What will really happen?
Sylvester?
I think the way that particular statement is structured presents some complications, just as the professor says, because then it means that religion is completely independent from the government and vice versa. So if somebody came up with a cult, for example, and is practicing something that is so, I would say, unethical or even criminal by the same constitution, but conducts it under the auspices of a religious group, then you cannot step in and stop issues, for example, like child sex, child molestation, and child slavery, as long as it's being conducted under the auspices of a religious group or gathering. So I think rightfully those are the kind of things that we need to give better looks, more critical thinking, and also take into account that we cannot adopt things that are just in other nations or other constitutions without clearly redefining and looking at how it ties in or even affects the lives of Kenyans and the values of Kenyans, because it could come from a country where the values are different from the values of Kenyans. So our values and our culture must also be taken into account before that kind of implementation.
What you just said, Sylvester, brings out a very, very, very big point, and this may be something that it's a subject matter that a lot of people may not want to talk about, but yes, our culture and our beliefs truly do not condone homosexuality. Let's face it, homosexuality is a big part in our country also. And so I guess my question here would be, with us understanding our beliefs and our traditions, should we ban homosexuality?
I think when you look at the cultural understanding, not even the Kenyan culture, but broadly the traditional African culture, I think that's what was factored in when that particular language was being incorporated in that constitution. And again, laws generally are to govern the entire population, much as most of them would be things that would work well for the majority. Sometimes it will not work well for everybody, but I would rather have a law that offends the least number of people possible, as opposed to a law that offends the majority and guarantees happiness for a minority. That would be my point. Professor had something to say about it?